Hello, welcome to Cooking with Kathy and Scott and Friends. And today we have some special friends that I know that you're just going to love. Welcome to Kendell, Linn, and Paul Fischer.
Hi there, thank you.
Hello, Kathy.
It's so nice to see you. And I love your shirts. You didn't happen to make those shirts, did you?
Oh, as a matter of fact, we did. What a great lead in. I actually made Paul's shirt and he made mine.
Well, they are great. And I know that you are such wonderful sewers and you're so creative. You gifted me with this fabulous Raggedy Ann doll that to me is like a museum piece. It's so well put together and the colors are so vibrant and it is so pretty. And she has a special place of attention in my bedroom. And so I see you guys every morning. But I'm so glad to see you on our show. And you are going to make something very special for us. Now, Kendell, you are making a Boston cream pie. Where did you get this recipe?
It's actually a variation on my mother's recipe, good Southern cook. I kind of jazzed it up. She would use just a chocolate cake mix and just plain vanilla pudding. And I found a Depression era cake called Crazy Cake, which is much denser, rich chocolate. And then instead of pudding, I put in a vanilla mousse, which I created, and then a chocolate ganache frosting.
That sounds fabulous. I know that people can't wait to see how you made it. And then, Paul, you took just a plain white cake and with white icing, and you made this spectacular dessert. It is so beautiful. How did you get into decorating?
Well, as I was growing up, I used to watch my grandmother bake and decorate cakes, and I thought as the years went on, there's something else that could be done instead of just using plain old frosting. So what I did is I came up with this chocolate lattice, and it's something that I figured that you could put food coloring in and make color decorations and for each holiday and add different varieties of fruit to go with the colors. So it kind of went hand in hand. So
Well, I have had a peek at it and it looks absolutely beautiful. And I love all the raspberries and the other things that you put in there. Well, I won't keep our audience any longer. And Paul and Kendell, take it away.
Hi, I'm Kendell Linn. I'm in Duluth, Minnesota. Just going to show you how to make a nice Boston cream pie, or actually kind of a variation on a Boston cream pie. And the recipe's rather interesting. It's very old. I call it accidentally vegan and vegetarian because it's a Depression era recipe that they used when they didn't have dairy available. So basically it's called a crazy cake. The original recipe I have from the 40s is quite scarred and tattered, but that's how all old recipes should look. We might as well just dive on in. It's a very simple cake to make. You'll swear by it. It comes out very moist. It's a heavy chocolate cake. Translates well into a bundt cake, a sheet cake, anything you want to do with it. We're going to be doing layers today. First off, we're going to start out with 3 cups of all-purpose flour. Level those off. You'll notice the canisters as well. I have a full set of these that were my mom's from the 50s when she got married. Never part with them. So there are 3 cups of all-purpose flour. Next, we'll be pulling in 2 cups of sugar. Not too hard so far. Next, you're going to want a teaspoon of salt. You're going to want 2 teaspoons of baking soda. Now the baking soda is integral because that is the leavener. It's going to actually react with vinegar that we'll be adding in a little bit. You're now going to also want 1/3 cup of cocoa, which I didn't open in advance. Sorry about that, folks. clean up there. Now that is all of your dry ingredients. So at this point I go in and I whisk that around. All right, continuing, we're just gonna whisk together the dry ingredients. Please forgive any yapping dachshund noises from the background. She thinks she's part of the show. Now, for our liquid ingredients, all you need are 2 cups of water. You want 3/4 of a cup of oil. Now here is another interesting option for you. The oil is fine, but if you want to go truly oil-free, which some of the vegans prefer, you can also use applesauce. Paul and I do a great deal of canning every year, including applesauce. And that is actually a great substitute for oil in any kind of baking recipe. So we put that in there. We're going to add our vanilla, about a teaspoon. Just kind of guesstimate there. And here's the odd part, the vinegar. And it takes 2 tablespoons of vinegar. That reacts with the baking soda as a leavener, but it doesn't make it rise too much, which perhaps a baking powder might. So do this backhanded. Now we're going to mix that. What I do is I do like to mix it for 2 minutes at a little higher speed because that aerates the batter a bit. Like I said, it's going to be a very dense cake. I'm not going to make you watch me do this for 2 minutes, but you get the idea. Now, a couple of tricks for you, some little baking hacks as it were. I have the baking pans ready to go, 2 cake pans. They are greased. They do have a parchment lining in the bottom, which I always bake with. I think that's very, very important for making cake removal far easier. And another trick is if you're making a chocolate cake that any of the cake is going to be exposed, as in this case, if you're using a non-stick pan, dust the pans with cocoa powder instead of flour. Then you don't have the white flour residue all the way around your beautiful cake. As you can see, that makes a beautiful batter, and that's really just about as easy as any cake mix you could possibly come up with. One more little baking hack for you. If you don't want your cake to crown too much in the middle, which happens a lot, especially with cake mixes, here is an old grandmother's trick. Just dip your finger in water and put it right down into the middle of the cake. And that manages to keep the cake from crowning too much. Now that's going to go into a 350-degree oven for about 35 minutes or until done. Just test it to see if it springs back, or use the old toothpick trick in the middle. And that's basically it, folks. We'll wait for those cakes to come up, then we'll talk about filling and glazing. Thank you. Well, our cakes are done. You can see they came out of the oven just beautiful. Took about 37 minutes. They are done in the middle. You'll notice they did not crown too much on us. That's thanks to the wonderful trick of dipping your finger in the water. Now I do want them to be completely level though for decorating. So what little crown we have, I am going to remove. There's not much, but there is a little. And don't throw these away. I have a trick for that too. Now as I'm pulling that off, you can see what a nice crumb this cake does have. Very, very moist, very tender. So what we're going to do is set that aside, because we are coming back to that for an instant emergency dessert trick. So we'll get those ready to go. Now for the filling, this is an interesting, easy trick, and this will work with any flavor of pudding you want to use. I make a lemon cake, which is a 7-layer lemon cake, which I do lemon cake, and then fill it with the mousse filling, and in that case I use a lemon filling instead of the vanilla. Today we will be using vanilla. The only secret is you have to make sure it is instant pudding and pie filling. Don't get the regular stuff or you're gonna have a big mess on your hands. So the first thing we're going to do, this is heavy whipping cream. We're gonna do, you can tell how precise my measurements are. That's 1 cup of heavy whipping cream. We're going for stiff peaks. Loud mixer. As I was saying, this can be a vegetarian option. I'll explain how to do this without dairy once we get to the next step. That's where we kind of want to be. Stiff peaks have formed. And here comes our little bit of magic. This is 1 cup of milk. Add the 1 cup of milk. And the secret ingredient, jello. There's always room for jello. So we'll add that jello in there. And then we're going to mix that well. So there we go with that. Now you will need to refrigerate that for at least 5 minutes. Longer the better, actually. So I will explain the vegan option on this for the filling. First off, you can use almond milk for the milk portion. Obviously the pudding. Just mix it as a regular pudding. Then what you can fold in is aquafaba, which if you don't know what that is, it's actually a meringue made from garbanzo bean juice. And if you're not used to it, that sounds very odd, but there is no bean flavor and it actually fluffs up into a very nice light meringue. You would then fold that in to the pudding mixture and that would give you the mousse-like texture you're going to want for the next step. But we'll wait for that to cool and be right back. Last step, we're going to fill the cake and we're going to glaze it. Easy, easy, easy step. It's been about 10 minutes. And I don't know if you can see this, but the mousse filling has set completely. Wasn't that a neat trick? Now, to go on to the assembly. You have a couple of options at this point. You can either cut each layer horizontally, which would give you 2 cakes, or you can make it full size. Today, just for expediency's sake, we're gonna go full size. So, let's dive into that. A couple of little tricks here too. Anytime you're frosting a cake or doing anything, put a little dab of frosting. I'll explain where this comes in later. We don't usually use canned. Right on the platter. The platter, in case you care, is Lennox Charleston pattern. My gosh, I had to stop and think there for a minute. Paul and I collect china, so it gets a little confusing at times. Alrighty. So there we have our first layer set down. And now to do our filling. If you want to really get tricky with this, you could also slice them as I was talking about earlier in the horizontal manner. Do that and make it a 7-layer cake with layers of pudding between each. That's really decadent. As you can see how nice this mousse fills out. I mean, it's just so easy, but it's so light and so fluffy. And that should probably be enough. So we'll set that aside. Now invert our second layer. It's a big cake. And now we'll go on to the glaze, which this is pretty easy, self-explanatory. I guess you could say 2 cups of confectioner's sugar, powdered sugar, is about what you want. Once again, this is just kind of, you're guessing. You don't need that much glaze to go with it. Now that I'm looking at that cake, since I inverted it, I am going to pull a little trick here. Going back to the canned frosting, we want a completely smooth top. So the glaze gives it kind of like a mirror-like finish. So I'm going to steal a little bit of the canned frosting, put that on there, cover up those rack marks. This is what you call OCD baking. But there, that gives us a little smoother finish to work with. Alrighty. If you don't want to make the glaze, there's another trick as well. You could buy one of the cans of frosting, just heat it up till it softens a little bit. You don't want it to melt, but till it becomes a pouring consistency. Then you can just pour that over the cake if you'd like to save this effort. Now, so we've got our powdered sugar in there. We're gonna add about 1/4 cup of cocoa. Once again, just a smidgen of vanilla, probably about 1/4 teaspoon. A little shot of salt there. Never hurts anything. Got our whisk. And excuse me for one moment, I forgot a little something here, a very important part. You have to be very careful at this point. You could use either milk, almond milk, or water. But this saturates very quickly and you don't want it to be too runny. So you need to watch what you're doing. Now after you get it started, here's another secret for any frosting you're using. Use just a shot of corn syrup, plain old Karo corn syrup. And what that does is it makes it set better and it gives it a gloss. As you can see, I'm being very careful about not adding too much liquid because you want it to be spreadable but not runny. Oh, that vanilla smells so good. You can obviously do this with a hand mixer, but I find this gives me a better gauge of when it's the right consistency without over mixing. And this is just about right. can see that. That's about the consistency we definitely want. So, final step here, folks. Bring the lovely cake over. This is the fun part. Ooh, the drips. Now, smear that around, bringing it all the way to the edges, pushing it over the edges a little bit. So that you get that signature, delicious Boston cream pie dripping over the edges. Once again, the OCD baker, wanting a few more artistic drips. You can't have too many artistic drips. So there you have a wonderful, easy Boston cream pie. Let it chill. There is another secret to this pie though. And I'd normally like this to set for at least, I'd say, a half an hour and chill so that the frosting really settled up. But hang on one moment because I have another trick to show you. Anytime you are making a filled cake, you want to ensure that you use a serrated knife to cut it so you don't crush out all the filling. So you need to saw back and forth, otherwise you just mush, which I'm sure that's a good baking term, mush all the filling out, and we don't want that. So there you go, my friends. Your Boston cream pie is ready for a hot cup of coffee and a nice after-dinner conversation. Thanks a lot, and thanks to Paul for filming all this.
Hello, my name is Paul Fischer, and today we're going to decorate a 4-layered cake with cream cheese frosting, wrapped in chocolate lattice and topped with fresh fruit garnish. So let's get started. So today I've mixed up some cream cheese, powdered sugar, 2 8-ounce containers of cream cheese, vanilla, and also some cloves, which puts a little surprise in the cream cheese for you. So as you can see here, I've pre-started the frosting. And right now we're going to put on the cream cheese spread on the wheel. And I've begun to frost cakes ever since I've been a little boy with my grandmother. And back in those days, yes, back in those days, wasn't much food coloring. So I had come up with the invention of garden colors, as in beets for pink frosting and green spinach for green frosting. And I grew up with my grandmother, so that's how I learned how to bake and frost some cakes. Once we get the frosting on this cake all the way around, we're going to use a straight edge. And this is basically a bench scraper that I've used and I've adapted to this process, which makes it a lot easier. Firmly put it on the cake and turn it until all the lumps become smooth. And if you're going to run out of some frosting, that's okay. Just go ahead and put some more on there and continue. I'm going to grab a smaller spatula here and get to the bottom and go around with the smaller spatula. And take your time. The process does flow smoothly. And a couple more times, take your straight edge and continue to smooth it out. Okay, now we're going to top the cake on top and smooth it out from the center out. Sometimes when you have a cake that's very gentle and delicate, you don't want to have the cake fall apart on you. Okay, and then again take the straight edge and turn it until all surfaces are smooth. Smoother the frosting, the better, as the French chocolate lattice will go on, it will adhere to the cake better itself. So we'll set this aside, and next we're going to make the chocolate lattice. And there are different ways. What I have done so far, if you want the chocolate lattice to be even, measure from the bottom of your cake to the top of your cake. In this instance, it was 5.5 inches. Now, if you want it to go a little bit higher to the top, then allow some of the wax paper to stand that high. And what I've done here, I've cut a piece of wax paper for you. Okay? This is 5.5 inches wide. And take the paper and figure out the circumference of your cake, and that's where you want to cut it. So for now, I've gone and taken some chocolate, semi-sweet chocolate. I like using the wafers. They melt quickly and evenly, but also you can use a semi-sweet chocolate chips. They both work just as well. So what I've done, I've melted it to not get too hot because the chocolate will separate on you. There are different ways that you can do this to decorate the cake with the lattice work. I made a cone-shaped piece of paper, 8.5 by 11, with a tiny hole on the bottom. You fill that with your chocolate and squeeze and do your design. On the other hand, there's also a plastic baggie, which I have here. I'm going to clip the end of it with a very tiny hole. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill the bag with some chocolate. So grab a spoon. Fold the baggie back. And go ahead and put some chocolate in your plastic baggie. It's going to be a little messy, but the end results are worth it. Okay. And at this point in time, you want to take your wax paper and squeeze on the wax paper to any kind of design you want. Just go back and forth. You can do fancy designs. You can do fence work. But back and forth until you feel that you've got the required design that you prefer. I'm just going to go back and forth until I've used the chocolate up in the bag. Okay. Fairly simple process. And you want to get enough on your wax paper to make sure that it's going to hold together once you've taken it off. Okay, that looks good enough. And we're going to let this harden for right now. And we're going to let the cake harden, the frosting. It's easier to put the cake in the refrigerator for at least 10-15 minutes so the cream cheese hardens. And once that hardens and our chocolate hardens, we can attempt to wrap this around our cake. Thank you. Hello and welcome back. We've had time for our cake to rest and it's taken out of the refrigerator so the cream cheese can harden. We've also let this chocolate lattice work harden as well. Now, the remaining of the process, we have options. Here I have some fresh fruit, some raspberries, blackberries, and blueberries. But today we're going to be using the fresh raspberries for our topping and garnish. The first step we want to do is we want to mark the top of our cake of where we're going to put the icing and the raspberries. So what I have is a spatula here, the length, and I'm going to mark off where I believe I want to put the frosting and the raspberries. And this is just a guide to help you put the remaining of the decoration on top of the cake and your raspberries. Okay? And that's just a guideline for you. You don't have to follow them. Because a lot of times the frosting is a little thicker than what you have your lines. So we're going to take our piping bag that I've filled with cream cheese and put in a big enough tip at the end so your frosting will come out without any hesitation. So we're going to take those lines that we made and we're going to dollop across the top of your cake, like so. Again, your lines can be slanted, they can be straight, you can go in circles. It really doesn't matter. It's your preference how you want to decorate the cake. And the process is pretty quick. As long as your frosting is soft enough so that you can move quickly. Okay. And again, you can use different colors of frosting if you choose. Today we're just going to go with the white cream cheese frosting. Those are lines going in one direction. Turn the wheel and go in between where your raspberries are going to be placed. Two more lines to go. I think we've got the top complete with the frosting. There. Now you take your raspberries. These have been cleaned And you want to place them in between where you've put your cream cheese frosting. And these happen to be pretty good sized strawberry or raspberries, I should say. And it's very festive and colorful. And you can mix and match your berries if you choose. Put blackberries and or raspberries. Okay, looks like we got a couple more to go here. And one small one here on the edge. There we go. Now the next process you want to do, which is a little bit tougher to do, you've taken the wax paper, and what you want to do, try to start from the beginning where you want your lattice work to go. Turn it around until you can get all the way to the end. Now remember, you pre-measured this, so hopefully you'll end up right where you started. Okay, take and lightly press. And what we want to do is again put this in the refrigerator for another 10 minutes and let it harden. And once that hardens, we'll come back and finish the cake. Now we are at our final stage. We had taken the cake out of the refrigerator long enough for the chocolate lattice to set. So hopefully, with no further ado, we'll take the wax paper off. Nice and slow. Just take your time. You may have to do a little prying on some of these pieces. You can see it's releasing itself from the chocolate. The tedious part, but it's well worth it. Again, you can make your own designs on this chocolate for the wax paper. Flowers, if you have patience to do flowers, butterflies. And there we have it. The final process of decorating the cake, we're going to go around the bottom with our cream cheese and put some dollops to make sure that our lattice will stay in place on the bottom. There's your floral design on the bottom. What I've done earlier is I've taken a little piece chocolate and just made a swirl. Again, that can be your top. And there you have it. Thank you again for spending the time in the kitchen with us. And this is elegant but fairly simple cake decorating process and ideas for you. Thank you.
Wow, that was fabulous. And these cakes look so luscious. I wanted to just take a bite out of it right now, but they're almost too pretty to do that. Of course, I could be persuaded. They are just luscious. Now, Kendell, it looks more like a cake than a pie. how does a Boston cream pie turn into that fabulous cake?
Kind of an interesting story, actually. The Frisbee Bakery in Boston originally made this in a pie crust. It was a pie crust that was baked, and then a yellow cake was baked inside the pie crust that was then covered with a vanilla pudding and then the chocolate ganache. And so
Mm.
it just kind of evolved from there. So initially it was a combination pie and cake.
Okay, so it is a Boston cream pie cake. And Paul, um, how did you first get started making this lattices, and can they be used for other things?
Yes, Kathy, they can be used for a number of things. We used to just make sheet cakes and put lattice work on the top of the sheet cake. And what you can do when the chocolate is hard on the wax paper, you can decorate it, the tops with the pearl candies. You can put nuts on the top of those, and until it gets to the room temperature, and then you can mold them to any way and shape and form that you want. So yes.
Well, I'm sure any way that you shaped it, it would be absolutely fabulous. Thank you again so much for joining us. It was an absolute delight seeing you. And I know that our audience loved the way that you put those cakes together. And thank you, our audience, for joining us. Kendell, Linn, Paul Fischer, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.